Hey, what's up? I'm Seth, and this is What Movies Teach, the channel where I analyze the direct and indirect lessons in movies to decide if it's a movie I want to share with my kids. Okay, so I'm still looking at the movies in the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and now I'm doing Iron Man 2. You know, so I'm always asking this big question. I mean, is this a movie I would want to show to my kids? This movie is rated PG-13. It says it's for sci-fi action, violence, and some language. That doesn't describe the content to me at all. And to me, it's not just about a rating, it's about what you're getting out of it. What would my kids be getting out of this movie overall? What are they walking away with? Is that a good message? Is it not a good message? What are we looking at here? So would I share this movie with my kids? You know, I don't know. Let's take a look at it. So to give some context to these lessons, I want to talk about the movie, and by the way, spoiler alert. So this movie, the big central thing about this movie is that Tony Stark is dying. He built this arc reactor for his chest in the first movie to help keep him alive, but now that is poisoning him. It's killing him. And so you look at the decisions he makes with the knowledge that he's dying. And that's kind of stems off the big lessons in this movie. And you see him, besides dying, he's got some other big challenges in this movie. He's got a major competitor named Hammer, who took over all of the government contracts and is just trying to be the new Tony Stark, but he doesn't do a great job. There's also another guy named Ivan. His dad helped Tony's dad, and now Ivan is super upset because his dad was not treated very well by Tony's dad, and so now he's mad at Tony. And he's also really smart and can build his own arc reactor. And instead of using it to save the world or to do anything good in his life, he decides to enact revenge. So the first big lesson, though, I see in this movie, with all this going on, with Tony, with these competitors and these, bad guys trying to get him and everything, is, what are the decisions you would make in these situations if you were dying? And honestly, in Tony's case, he goes back to the way he was before he became Iron Man. In a lot of cases, he becomes quite irresponsible. You see him just kind of living in the moment. You see him, going into a dangerous race car, driving around with, thinking he has no consequences there. That's when he gets attacked by Ivan. Ivan, is this guy who's super smart, just like Tony. He built his own arc reactor and he uses it to build like these electric whips that can cut through anything like a lightsaber. And he comes over and he sees Tony, in this race car just having fun, and he cuts it in half and tries to kill him. And so a consequence to Tony's behavior of just having fun and living in the moment is that he's putting himself in danger. You also learn in this moment that one of Tony's suits apparently only weighs as much as a briefcase, because you can just carry it around like a briefcase, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But as far as like really cool scenes in movies, this is one of the best, where you see him pull out this briefcase and it turns into his Iron Man suit and he's able to fight off Ivan. So as far as the movie being fun, it's a lot of fun in these situations. But as far as teaching, what to do if your life isn't going well, at least in the case of Tony living in the moment, you see that doesn't really go well for him. So it just kind of gets worse from here. So the whole interaction with Ivan and the race car and the danger and everything, that doesn't help Tony, change his attitude. He starts drinking more. He has this huge party where he's actually using the suit to mess around. I mean, this is a, billion-dollar suit? In fact, at this scene, you see his friend get really upset with him. And they have this huge fight, but you still see Tony acting irresponsibly where he just doesn't care. He's just fighting, it's destroying his house, and his friend sees that he doesn't really care anymore. He doesn't really know what's happening with him. He doesn't know that he's dying. But he knows that Tony is using something in a way that he shouldn't. And so, his best friend, his name is Rhodey, he takes one of Tony's suits, and he gives it, basically, to the government, which is something Tony tried to avoid, but again, he's dying, and so he doesn't really care as much once that even happens. He's not even sure what to do. He's lost, and he's broken, and he's just going back to the way he knew how to act before. So we get to this point, and Tony's in this really low place. In the first movie, you saw that Tony was a problem solver. And in this movie, he still tries to be a problem solver, but he can't solve this problem. He can't figure out how to make his arc reactor work, the thing that's actually keeping him alive, without it also killing him. He's done everything he possibly can. And he's got these people that are fighting against him. I mean, again, this guy named Hammer, you can see that he just wants to compete with Tony and just kind of be the new Tony Stark and take over. You see that he does it, though, in ways that are taking shortcuts. He's cheating. So after Tony has this fight with Ivan, Ivan fakes his own death. Hammer finds Ivan and uses him to build his his machines and he builds him some drones, and you see that he's cheating, taking shortcuts, and in the end that doesn't work out for him. I mean, he ends up going to jail. You also see with Ivan, so Ivan is really focused on revenge. That's kind of his whole thing, is just get revenge on Tony for the fact that his dad hurt my dad and put me in a bad place. So the lesson you get from Ivan is that revenge actually destroys you, because in the end, it does. It doesn't work out for him. And you think about that later in these Marvel movies, Civil War, I mean, Tony doesn't really remember this lesson he learned from Ivan, I guess. I don't know. Another question, though, the movie raises is, what does it mean to be a hero? And the answer that we get from this movie is, for, at least in Tony's sake, he's just a hero when it's convenient. And I don't know if that's a great answer. I don't think that's an answer that I want my kids to learn either. And maybe it will bring up some good discussion. You see him help people out at his own Stark Expo, this huge conference, science expo that he's doing, and but you don't really see him go out of his way to help anybody else in the entire movie. The biggest lesson, though, that this movie gives us is you have Tony, he's got this big problem where he's dying, and he just can't figure it out on his own. And he needs to rely on other people. He can't just be a maverick. He can't just do everything by himself. It just doesn't work that way anymore. He runs into this problem, and he is forced to ask for help. I mean, he gets to this point where he practically destroys his own home fighting his friend, and then these agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., these secret agents come and are like, you can't figure this out on your own. Here, we have some information for you from your dad. Look at it and see if it will help you. And then you finally see him open up to be like, okay, I can't figure this out on my own. I've tried everything. I'll use these guys' help. And he starts asking people for help and getting help from other people. He gets help from S.H.I.E.L.D. Eventually we find out that, Ivan and Hammer are trying to destroy his Stark Expo. And so he asks Rhodey to help him. Even though Rhodey's suit, for a second, is controlled by the bad guy, he resets and he says, hey man, the bad guy's coming, we've got to do something about this. And he stops just doing everything by himself and really looking to the fact that he can have other people help him. Which is really good, because the next movie we'll see him in is The Avengers, which is a big hero team-up, and he needs to know how to work with others. So by the end of the movie, we see these big lessons that were brought up about, what would you do if you were dying? Trying to get help from others. Revenge doesn't get you anywhere. Don't try and take shortcuts. All these things. They're not super strong lessons is the only thing. The only really strong one is that Tony needs to work with others and Tony needs to change. But again, by the end of this movie, he doesn't change a whole lot. You don't see a huge change in Tony. He does start treating people better, and he does start realizing he needs to do more with himself, but he kind of realized that in the first movie. And so you see a rehash of those first lessons a little bit, and I think that's why, by the end of this movie, what I really thought of it was just kind of meh. Don't get me wrong, it's a fun movie. It's action-packed. The characterization of Tony Stark and the dialogue he has with the other characters in the movie is great. It's fun, it's funny, it's a good just action movie if you just want to enjoy that. However, walking away uplifted or with new lessons, I didn't really feel like a lot of new ground was tread in this movie as far as like his character development is concerned. So the big question I come back to is, would I share this movie with my kids? Honestly, I'm leaning more towards no. The content is more dark. So you see Ivan's character, he is violent. He is bloody. There's a whole situation where he's trapped by Hammer's men because he's starting to betray Hammer, and he kills those men. And in the background, this whole time where he's having to talk, you see these guys hanging in the background, and they're dead. And it's a little disturbing. There's blood all over Ivan. It's not really explicitly directly violent, but it is still really dark. You see this character is super dark, and he's supposed to be. I mean, he grew up in a dark situation, and he just lives a dark life. And so I think, at least for my kids, some of that content would distract, though, from the lessons and from the rest of the movie. They would fixate on some of this, bloody violence. As far as language, the language is present. There is some, I would say PG-13 rated language. As far as like sexuality is concerned, Tony does objectify and sexualize women again, just like he did in the first movie. When I do show this to my kids, I would use that as a lesson and say this is not how we treat women, and he's just not a good example of that. So this is just my opinion, but if I was going to give an age range to this movie, I would say it probably fits in that PG-13 to 14 age range, at least for kids, maybe a little older than that. You know, you need to be able to deal with some violence, some characters that are not, you know, morally solid, and just be able to understand the choices people make when they're in tough situations. And that those choices might not be choices that you would make, or that you would maybe want your kids to see, or that I would want my kids to see, is what I'm getting out of this. So the good thing about a movie that's just okay is that you can make it better with some good questions. So you could ask your kids a couple of things, like, you know, is Tony Stark a hero? Did his actions help him be a hero or not? And see what they say. You know, I believe some of his actions did, some of them didn't, and it'd be kind of cool to see what they think about that. Some other questions might be, you know, what would you do if you're dying? Would you make the same type of decisions as Tony made? Another question I would ask is, if you can't solve a problem on your own, what's the next step? What do you do? So those are just a few questions that you could ask at the end of this movie to maybe make it better. But, you know, I'm sure there's a bunch more. If you come up with some of your own, let me know. Comment below. Okay, so that's Iron Man 2. So, yeah, fun movie, yes. A movie that I would share with my kids right now at where they're at. As far as their understandings of good and bad, I think I would need to wait for that. They need to understand that some people are not good and bad. There's gray areas, and there's learning, and there's a lot that people are going through, and we need to understand how difficult those situations are. And again, that's a judgment call I would make with my kids because, you know, I know their personalities. I've lived with them for a long time, and I understand what they know right now. You might make a different decision. And if so, or if you agree with these lessons or you disagree, I would love to hear it, so comment below. If you like this style of movie review and talking about the lessons, subscribe to this channel. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you next time.